here. Hello, hello, welcome everyone. We're going to give our participants just a couple minutes to join in before we get started here. All right. All right, thank you everyone for joining us today on the ASES webinar series. I am Carly Cipolla, the Director of Operations for the American Solar Energy Society. So thank you for joining us today. Before we do get started, I just want to give some updates on who and what the American Solar Energy Society is, and then highlight some of our current events and programs here for you all. So the American Solar Energy Society, otherwise known as ASES, is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that was established in 1954 and advocates for sustainable living and 100% renewable energy by sharing information, events, and resources to cultivate community and power progress. Our 50th annual National Solar Conference, Solar 2021, Empowering a Sustainable Future, will be a hybrid conference taking place in Boulder, Colorado at the University of Colorado Boulder and online on an easy to use and intuitive platform from August 3rd to the 6th this summer. Registration is open and the early bird deadline for discounts up to $100 off of conference passes has been extended to June 1st. You can register now and learn more at ases.org/conference. I've also shared here a little promo for you guys to get an extra 10% off registration with promo code 2021partner. You apply this at checkout and it will give you an extra 10% off. So be sure to check out the information at ases.org/conference and register by June 1st to get the best deals. ASES is also happy to announce that the National Solar Tour will be taking place October 3rd and 4th. You can sign up now to host a local solar tour or a single solar site. Feel free to head to nationalsolartour.org to learn more and sign up. The deadline for that is August 15th. So we've got a bit of time here. We'll also have a webinar about the National Solar Tour next month. Also want to share that ASES recently launched our online community. It's a space for our community to collaborate, share content, information, and network with each other. You can learn more and head to the online community. It's community.ases.org. You can join ASES to participate on the platform, so you can hop online and start engaging. If you're interested in joining or renewing your ASES membership, you can do that at ases.org/join. All right, thank you for taking the time to listen to some of our ASES updates. I hope you can join us at the 50th Annual National Solar Conference this August. So I'll go ahead and hop into introducing our content and panelists today. PV Magazine reporters William Driscoll and John Fitzgerald Weaver will provide a play-by-play descriptions and color commentary respectively on technologies and renewables on the grid and how they're going to gain traction in several states. John Fitzgerald Weaver is a solar power professional known digitally as the commercial solar guy. His company has general contractor licenses in Massachusetts and Rhode Island and salespeople on the ground throughout Northeast USA. The company is developing commercial PV projects ranging from 50 kilowatts through 20 megawatts nationwide and storage projects as well. William Driscoll has been a reporter for PV Magazine USA since 2018, specializing in technologies and strategies that can make room for more solar on the grid. He previously presented at Energy Exemplar's 22nd Annual Electric Market Forecasting Conference on solar technologies, costs, and modeling present and future. A presentation that was likewise based on this reporting for PV Magazine USA. The webinar will be available in a recorded format later this week on YouTube, so I'll be sure to follow up with everyone on the content of this once it's available. Now I'll go ahead and turn things over to our presenters today, John and Will. So Will, feel free.
Thank you, Carly. And by the way, I'm a new ASES member as well, and I appreciate this opportunity.
Wonderful.
As you said, I'm joined today by my PV Magazine colleague, John Fitzgerald Weaver, and I'll pass it over to John to say a few words.
Hi, everybody. Carly, thank you for reading my profile off PV Magazine. That was really funny to hear, said out loud. But I think we're going to look at the membership now, too, just because we hadn't really, there's so many different names, but now we'll pay attention to it because you did some good marketing with us as well. So thanks for inviting.
Wonderful, of course.
So I'll be providing the play-by-play in this webinar, and John will provide the color commentary. Uh-oh, it's not advancing.
Oh.
Okay, fine. We have reserved a generous amount of time for your comments at the end and any questions. Comments are especially welcome. As a reporter, my knowledge is wide but not deep, so I probably won't be able to answer the questions you might have. Also, a lot of information is available in the linked stories that will be provided throughout. So my hope is that you'll please share your own perspective and knowledge on any of these 6 technology policies as a comment, and that would be in the Q&A box. So I'm hoping to get some real dialogue going here if we can. If you start your comment, again, entered in the Q&A box with the number of the technology from 1 to 6, as you'll see, that would be helpful. In the discussion segment, Carly will read aloud your written comments and questions. You may identify yourself in your comment or question or not, as you choose. We're going to talk about 6 technologies. The first 4 are solar app for permitting, hosting capacity maps, smart inverters compliant with the IEEE 1547 standard, and utility modeling that co-optimizes investments in generation and in transmission and distribution. Number 5 is real-time retail pricing. And number 6 as a bonus item is fixing NREL's map of solar potential across the US. I expect that some ASES members are already involved in solar advocacy or may be interested in advocacy. I see 2 kinds of policies helpful to solar deployment. One type is technology policies, such as we'll talk about here. And these may be difficult for many people to understand. We'll get into some of the technical details in this webinar. Other policies, such as the renewable portfolio standard, are easier for everyone to understand. So as for technology policies, I expect that ASES members who choose to advocate can be especially effective in their advocacy, given the strong technical understanding and hands-on experience that ASES members typically have. This webinar will not cover policy options that are unrelated to technologies, such as renewable portfolio standards, net metering, community solar, and state mandates for solar on new buildings. So again, there are 6 technology policies that we'll run through here. The first is Solar App for automated solar permit processing. This is an online permit application tool developed by NREL, working with local permitting authorities. It's designed to simplify permit applications and provide instantaneous approval for applications that meet all requirements. You'll see some links to news stories here if you're not already familiar with Solar App. NREL has recently accelerated its rollout of Solar App as described in these news stories, and ultimately the tool will be available for adoption by any local permitting authority. An advocacy opportunity here would be to advocate with local authorities to adopt Solar App or an alternative version, Solar App Plus, which is integrated with the cloud software program Accel, which many larger government agencies use. John, is there anything you want to say about Solar App?
Yeah, so we hear a lot in the news about the lower soft costs of solar in other countries. Germany and Australia come to mind. And I also run a small residential solar company, and we're trying to just figure out how to grow it and scale it. And so we're doing a lot of software, a lot of spreadsheets as the leads come in, creating proposals. And we're also looking at Solar Apps specifically for where we're going to expand, because we're thinking if the application makes sense technically, we could probably build solar there a little better. So I'm hoping that this catches on and works well, but it wouldn't even be the end of it, because in mass, our interconnection and installation process, the documentation for interconnection and incentives is longer than permitting. So, at least this would clean out one thing, and maybe in states that we're not as familiar with, but who connect faster, it'd work better there. So I'm looking forward to it, hoping it is open and spreads, that we can tap into it with maybe an API and program with it. Because you see headlines around the world of much cheaper solar, and you see Tesla now pitching solar at like $2, $2.10 for residential. That's a real cheap number. And I'm wondering how the heck to get there if it's possible. Maybe the software like this will help by lowering our soft costs, our office work.
Okay, thank you, John. Number 2, hosting capacity maps. Let's take a look at one first. This slide shows 2 versions of a hosting capacity map. The colored lines are distribution lines. Where the hosting capacity of a distribution line is shown in green, a solar developer can be relatively assured that a new distributed solar installation in that green area or on that green line will not require a distribution system upgrade. So you see here, in the map at left, in this area, we have a lot of red lines coming up here. And for that same area in the map at right, you see this green line and then yellow lines on either side, whereas here, they were all red in the first map. So what happened is the second map is a corrected version of the first map, showing, and this shows that hosting capacity maps need to be accurate to be useful. And generally, this shows what hosting capacity maps look like. So this slide reiterates the point of hosting capacity maps. They save solar developers time and money. And now John is going to present this slide, which pulls a quote from one of his stories.
That's a good way to get me to present within this, is to pick a story that I wrote, Will. So that was very strategic and smart of you. I like it. Maybe I helped you find it at some point. But hosting capacity maps in Massachusetts and Rhode Island are really important, because we're installing a lot of solar up here on the distribution side of things. And as a salesperson wanting to be honest with my customers, it's really important to walk into a meeting and say, hey, we do see space on these power lines, and I don't want you to blow this first few $1,000 for interconnection and permitting. As a small business who doesn't have a lot of money for base salaries, it's helpful to have this hosting capacity so that I, who's literally the only sales guy in-house for these 2 states, so that I don't waste my time chasing projects that explode 9 months later. Because interconnection for commercial projects is taking anywhere from 4 to 9 months in these 2 areas. So it's going to help me do better, quicker, more efficient business if these documents continue to expand and get better. They're still not perfect, even the versions we have. We have one in Rhode Island that's solid. What would be great further down is that if the local power line substation is full, and the hosting capacity map says 0 capacity, tell me what it will cost to upgrade. Tell me what the equipment would be. Tell me what the schedule to make that happen might be, because some projects can afford grid upgrades that are bigger than just a transformer, and that would just give us a chance to build more and go. So the there's like 6, 7, 8 states that have hosting capacity maps. They're relatively new, less than 5 years old. It really seems like this should be a nationwide thing. You know, the Department of Defense should want solar power and energy storage on every single substation across the country, you'd think. So.
Okay, now back to me. As of mid-2020, 7 states required utilities to produce solar hosting capacity maps, and 3 more states have joined since then, bringing the total to 10 states. In at least 4 more states, regulators were considering requiring utilities to produce such maps or to improve the maps they're already publishing. And in Georgia, solar groups have called for state regulators to require Georgia Power to produce solar hosting capacity maps. One group advocating nationally for hosting capacity maps is IREC, the Interstate Renewable Energy Council. That group has developed a guide for regulators regarding hosting capacity maps. An advocacy opportunity here is state-level advocacy to require utilities to provide hosting capacity maps, and some sources are shown here. The third technology policy option involves smart inverters compliant with the IEEE 1547 standard. IEEE is the global professional organization of engineers, and they have a large section of power engineers. Inverters compliant with IEEE 1547 enable distributed solar to provide grid services. So, as expert Michael Milligan has said, inverters form the basis of the grid capabilities of solar. The very fast response of inverters enables the use of software to control how, in this case, rooftop solar interacts with the power system. And grid operators can call on distributed solar for grid services if the distributed solar can respond to signals from the utility or from an aggregator. And soon we'll get to the capability of these inverters to respond independently to passive signals for price, voltage, and frequency. Here, this table was developed by Michael Milligan, showing the 7 types of grid services that various types of generation can provide. And you see under inverter-based with solar PV, that's the second column of circles, PV can provide good, very good, or excellent grid services in all 7 areas. That's this column here. 4 states have set requirements for new inverters to be compliant with this IEEE standard: Hawaii, California, Minnesota, and Maryland. And the effective date is set for the near future. For example, in Maryland, it's next January 21st. All states advocating for high renewables should do likewise, says the Center for Renewables Integration. That way, the more capable inverters will be in place as the need for them increases, as more solar is added to distribution circuits and generally. For example, the alternative method of increasing hosting capacity by installing utility-supplied voltage regulation hardware can be costly. Sorry. Sorry about that. Okay. A key question is whether, if your state requires these smart IEEE 1547 compliant inverters for new installations of distributed solar, will those solar installations be compensated for providing grid services? Sunrun, for one, aims for state policy that does enable distributed solar to be compensated for grid services. The issue has come up in a 2019 Pennsylvania regulatory proceeding. Again, regarding compensation, the nonprofit consultancy Grid Lab is developing a case for an autonomous grid to allow distributed resources to respond to passive signals, price, voltage, and frequency. And the executive director of Grid Lab, Rick O'Connell, has said, "We believe these 3 are all you need for most distributed energy resources." The key point here is that the IEEE standard comes with grid supportive features that allow DERs to autonomously respond to grid signals. And when the DERs respond to grid signals, providing grid services, clearly their owners should be paid for those services. Separately, there's a proposal that states could harmonize smart inverter settings. To get into this, this slide shows an image from the consulting firm GridLab. You see at the top right, large PV added to the end of the feeder. In the graph, you see the voltage profile as it approaches the end of the feeder at right, exceeds the recommended upper limit. So that's the issue. GridLab says the solution is to harmonize smart inverter settings so that the smart inverters can help regulate voltage on the circuit and increase the circuit's hosting capacity. GridLab recommends two specific smart inverter capabilities that each state should select. First, volt VAR, which requires no communication signals from the utility, and second, volt watt, which GridLab calls a backstop for voltage events. California requires both of these settings, volt VAR and volt watt, while Hawaiian Electric requires volt VAR. And here are some sources for that. Advocacy opportunities here would be to advocate at the state level to require distributed solar and storage to use inverters compliant with IEEE 1547. There's an IREC primer and webinar on this topic. And then, as I just presented, advocacy could call for harmonizing settings for these smart inverters within the state and compensating distributed solar and storage for the grid services that they provide through the smart inverters. So John, do you have an opinion on IEEE 1547 compliant inverters?
I think they're going to happen significantly because even if they're not required, because there's two recent rulings on the federal level. So FERC 841 and FERC 2222. 841, I believe, focuses on energy storage, and 2022 on distributed generation. And I'm not a policy expert at this level, but I'm smart enough to know that we need to pay attention to it because these two essentially give the legal right for distributed resources to participate in ISO, in RTO and ISO level wholesale markets. And so if you're in my business and my customer's residential system in an aggregator pool can participate in a wholesale market, we're going to figure out how to do it. And if we see the cost of this hardware, because the hardware already exists, so if we see the cost of the hardware and it pencils in our spreadsheets, we're going to do it. And you know who is going to do it already? Sunrun, because Sunrun's smart, and so is Sonova, so is Tesla. Sunrun's already got their residential solar plus storage selling, if they can get it done, into the ISO New England market starting maybe next year for like 20 megs worth. So it's coming. The question is, will FERC pull it forward or will states require it? I think local grids were going to technically have to require it once we scale to 30–40% of electricity coming from solar, and we're maxed out for 4 hours straight on the grid. So they're coming.
Okay, thanks, John. And I just want to note there are a few different issues at play here, whether and Sunrun is happy to aggregate the distributed solar and storage, and these IEEE 1547 compliant inverters. If a state like California sets the settings for these inverters in a certain way, then there's no need for an aggregator or for the utility to enable compensation of owners of distributed energy resources. Okay, technology option number 4 is utility modeling that co-optimizes generation investments with transmission and distribution investments. Utility modeling is used, for example, in states that require utilities to produce integrated resource plans and obtain state approval for the utility's recommended investments. A utility model that co-optimizes, what I'll call a co-optimization model, recognizes that adding distributed solar and storage reduces required transmission and distribution investments. Some people use the term non-wires alternatives to convey this idea. At least one utility modeling system can represent this benefit of distributed solar and storage, namely the wisdom model from Vibrant Clean Energy. In fact, I don't know of any other co-optimization models. The wisdom model reflects the fact that the more power you generate where it's used, while perhaps adding more storage as well, the less investment you need in transmission and distribution. Wisdom modeling of the Xcel Energy territory in Minnesota found that including 1 gigawatt of distributed solar by 2030 and another 1.6 gigawatts by 2035, paired with storage, was the least cost option for that utility, or was included in the least cost generation mix for that utility. That's a lot of distributed solar in a single state. And those results are from an independent integrated resource plan, or IRP, sponsored by the Citizens Utility Board of Minnesota and submitted to state regulators. Here's a key quote that I want to read in full from a national study by the firm Vibrant Clean Energy, which developed the wisdom model and conducts modeling runs. In their national study, they found that developing 247 gigawatts of distributed solar and 160 gigawatts of distributed storage is the most cost-effective way for the United States to transition to a clean energy system by 2050. That means adding about 8 gigawatts of distributed solar per year nationwide, which is approximately 2 to 3 times the amount that we're adding per year now. Advocacy opportunities here would be for states that require utilities to prepare IRPs to develop an independent IRP analysis like the one conducted in Minnesota based on co-optimization modeling, or alternatively, persuade state regulators to require utilities to use co-optimization modeling. Number 5, next is real-time retail pricing. This kind of pricing encourages using power when the price is lowest. For example, when the sun is shining. It also encourages storing power and then discharging it when the price is highest. For example, storing solar power and selling it during the peak period. Real-time retail pricing has been proven to work in California with pilot deployment across 115 homes. In a deeply engineered approach for this pilot deployment, the prices of electricity, retail electricity, had 4 components, beginning with the real-time wholesale locational marginal price. Other price components accounted for resource adequacy, which is also known as reserve margin, and for the finite capacity of the distribution grid. Plus, there was a fixed fee to cover billing costs. The California Solar and Storage Association has called on California regulators to make real-time pricing an option in the San Diego area and ultimately statewide. Note that real-time retail pricing can work well when there is a robust approach to ensuring resource adequacy. In Texas, where market forces alone have been the only means used to incentivize resource adequacy by allowing wholesale power prices to reach $9,000 per megawatt hour, real-time retail pricing is not a good option. A side note here is that aggregated demand response could be a step toward real-time retail pricing. I don't want to say for sure it will lead in that direction, but potentially it could. An advocacy opportunity here would be to call for real-time retail pricing at the state level. Now, recall if you had any thoughts on this one.
Yeah, well, this I think ties closely to the technology we spoke about in advocacy number 3, which is making our rooftop solar and energy storage systems have better rights to the market. You know, if we have batteries remotely, we can make use, if we add better technology, have batteries, have solar, and now we have a real-time retail pricing market. Having those technologies, it becomes more financially viable for them. It's just, it's another layer of making it work a little bit better. As well, of course, you want to, as we start scaling electric cars, we're really, apparently, per all the data, we're really going to need to pay attention to that a lot. So if we, at our homes, at our businesses, have various intelligent pieces of software, looking at the grid, looking at what we're generating, looking at our vehicles, there can be value there, because vehicle to grid, vehicle to house, there's going to be a lot of people who will opt into that because it'll lower their demand charge, or just because we think it's cool. And we'll make 50 bucks, $100 from our car. So I think this is part of an ecosystem of legal adjustments that could help solar and energy storage, distributed solar and energy storage, grow. It's a one among multiple dominoes that would be great to see fall and evolve.
Okay, thank you. And now, then last, and this is my personal initiative, would be to persuade the National Renewable Energy Laboratory to use a color scheme in its solar potential map that accurately represents the data. This image shows 2 versions of NREL's Global Horizontal Solar Irradiance Map. The version at left is the one that NREL has published on its website. At the bottom right of that map, as you see here, in the key are the data showing the numbers represented by each of these color bands. And in fact, when you look at those numbers, the average solar irradiance in the top 2 bands, shown here in pale yellows, the average irradiance level in those bands is about 70% of the solar irradiance in the desert Southwest. You would never know that from NREL's color scheme, which suggests that the solar potential drops off sharply as you move away from the Southwest. In the version at right, which I developed, the desert Southwest is represented as pure red, and the other bands are represented with shades of red that become progressively less intense as you move to areas that are not quite as sunny. The color bands transition to lighter shades of red, reaching dark pinkish reds in the northernmost bands, to accurately indicate that they have about 70% of the solar irradiance of the desert Southwest band. I maintain that NREL should convey to the American public that just as you can grow corn and soybeans in the northern continental US, you can generate substantial amounts of solar power throughout the continental US as well. Advocacy could be directed to the US Department of Energy, which funds NREL. John, did you have thoughts on this one?
Yeah, since you were advocating for a map, I wanted to advocate for one as well. I don't know how many of you are familiar with solarpowerrocks.com. It's a website that used to exist, and it had a wonderful map that put together on a state level the return on investment for residential solar. As well, it put grades on them like A through F, and it had a bunch of variables. I'd love to see somebody, and this is me pushing you, Carly, and the organization, or somebody, to take a map from like NREL with this, a map of the EIA's price of electricity by utility, and then desire.org, run out of North Carolina, and combine that data so that residential customers could click on a single map of their state, because that's, or their utility, and know what the ROI is, what the energy generation is, what a general system costs. in a single central location from a trusted source. I write articles on my website from NREL and Berkeley when they put out labs or articles showing the hardware price of solar, because they collect it as best they can and put out 2 really great reports. I actually wrote one recently for residential on PV Magazine, and that data is out there. And if our buyers get to see it a little bit before, they're probably going to trust it a little better when they get a proposal, and maybe they'll move through things a little faster. So you know, it's really great to see everything that NREL puts out. Love all their data. I just want to see a little more. And I'm also sad because we lost Solar Power Rocks recently, and we need to resurrect it.
Wow, great idea, John. So now we'd like to open it up, especially to your comments and any questions as well. Again, you may enter comments and questions using the Q&A function. And while you're thinking of comments and any questions to offer, we have a poll to start things off. So Carly, do you just take over from here? I'll stop share. Oh, okay, here we go. So, oh, Carly, are you going to present this?
We just launched the poll. The which of the 6 technology policies seems to be the most compelling to you? Multiple choice. So if our attendees want to fill that out.
I'm upset, Carly. I'm not allowed to vote.
Me either. I think I don't think the panelists are allowed to vote. But you can give your opinion, John, if you have.
Oh, sure. I'm the module level intelligence, the in IEEE 1547 is really compelling to me because I'm big on distributed energy. It's a political thing for me. I want individuals to have freedom, and I want them to have some money and be able to defend themselves in different ways. And so solar at home protects you against monopoly powers, and you can control your energy. If the grid goes down, you can protect yourself, because it's poor people who were hurt in Texas, not the rich people who had big hardware. And so if you have a smarter rooftop system that is grid forming or just smarter and can protect your household in a moment of complexity, it's, you know, it's worth life or death for some people. And so and plus that just builds up from the other direction. It's the distributed grid building into the big grid. And if our grid turns into that, everything else changes. The whole world changes if we power ourselves starting small. And so that one would just be the most far reaching in the effects that it has on everything else.
Well, if we're still waiting for results to come in, I will say that I am a big fan of using sophisticated utility models. And so co-optimizing or co-optimization modeling sounds like a smart way to go. A small investment up front can save you a lot of money down the road, as well as greenhouse gas emissions, by counting the transmission and distribution benefits, the savings in transmission and distribution from distributed solar. And by the way, it means more distributed solar being deployed. So Carly, I do not see any comments or questions in the chat. Oh, there's one in the Q&A. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we just got one in here from Christian Fox. Have you seen any pushback from utility companies about distributed energy? Here in Nevada, we already have history of pushback from utilities for net metering. I'm wondering how much pushback there could be with additional growth of a distributed energy and more opportunities for residents to anger the utility companies. Haha.
I mean, there's constant Uh, the utilities want to control generation. That's without a doubt. The utilities want to control the assets because of the way utilities are structured. Utilities get paid money for all the assets they control and all the energy they sell. They get paid a guaranteed return on investment right above it. And every single sale that goes to us that stays at home is less money than the people who are, they're profit motivated. They're individuals running a big corporation. They get stock options. So heck yeah, they're always going to push back. Every state.
We've also got some comments from Scott Tracy. Totally agree with the concept of starting with the grid fringe and decentralizing democratizing
Yes.
power generation and distribution. Some of the benefit of this approach is the potential for removing significant load from the utility run grid.
Great. I mean, yeah, that's why I wanted to do this webinar for ASES members, because, I think of ASES as being primarily focused on distributed generation. And, every individual distributed solar deployment is a drop in the bucket, but there's so many of them, and there could be so many more in a cost-effective way that you add them all up, and it's a significant part of the solution to transitioning our grid to clean, renewable energy. So thank you for that comment.
And we just wrapped up the poll results here, and looks like those smart inverters compliant with the IEEE 1547 had 82% of the votes. And then the solar app for permitting was at 27%. The hosting capacity maps at 18%, tied with utility modeling.
Okay, so Carla, we had a second poll ready.
Yes. Let me go ahead and launch the second poll. The second poll asks, are you interested in advocacy regarding any of these technology policies? And we'll have you answer with one of the options, yes, no, or maybe. John or Will, do you have anything to add about this question?
Well, I think to me, it's, I'm a new ASES member, and I wanted to, again, I think there's, that distributed solar could use more, a bigger voice in the solar discussion. And that, that goes to communications and reports that get media coverage, and lobbying and advocacy. So, I did bring the advocacy element to each of the 6 topics, because I wanted to see if ASES members might be interested in distributed solar advocacy, specifically for any of these technology policies, which I believe ASES members are far better equipped to explain to the public and to state regulators, state legislators, than the average bear, shall we say.
And Susan was asking if this was personal or ASES-based advocacy. Will, did you want to answer that question?
Well, I just asked it generically because, I'm just a member of ASES. So, this is not a question coming from ASES, it's coming from a member of ASES. So I just asked it generically.
But I would say that it would be a little both. Like, you should push ASES or just push the organizations, because there's SEPA, who focuses specifically on utility scale, SEA, who's very, very utility scale. But they do everything. They do lots of distributed as well, but they're bigger. They pay attention to the larger volume. You know, in the Northeast, there's CBANE for commercial. Vote Solar is one of the groups I know who does significant small scale, and we need more. We need more than just Vote Solar. You know, Sunrun does care about small scale, but small scale at the large scale. Same with Tesla, same with others. So there needs to be somebody who's going to knock on the doors of the politicians for the 100 million rooftop solar systems we're going to do. And eventually, you know, there'll be 2 million local installers, and that'll have a lot of effect, but still got to push somewhere. I want to know how to lobby a little better. I don't think I'm great at it. I just write and I sell stuff. So I figure that's enough, but I do want to do more, politically speaking.
Yeah, definitely. That is a fair point. And we do also work with a lot of our local and regional chapters across the country in that sense of working in your local area and your state to try to pass more solar and renewable friendly policies. So ASES does help push that information quite a bit as well, but definitely some room to help here more on the national scale and getting some of that information out from ASES. We did wrap up the poll results here for Are You Interested in Advocacy Regarding Any of These Technology Policies? We had 38% say yes and maybe, both 38%, and then just a couple of people who said no, but that is wrapped up here. Will or John, if you have any comments about this?
I think we all advocate to some degree by voting, just in
Yes.
general.
Yeah, that's very good to know. It's, you know, and again, Carly, I really appreciate the opportunity to present this to other ASES members today. And John, I appreciate your co-presenting with me, alongside me.
Oh, and we've got another comment here from Scott Tracy. Promoting greater consistency in policy development and permitting would be a huge step forward in increasing the rate of implementation of DERs.
I like saying DERs.
I was tempted. Yes, thank you so much, Will and John, for joining us this month on the ASES webinar series. Really appreciate your input here and sharing this information with our ASES members and ASES community. It's been a pleasure to have you both.
Thanks for the invite.
Yes, thank you, Carly.
Do either of you have some closing comments before we wrap up, or anything else you'd like to cover?
Not me, thank you.
I'm always political. Just vote and be smart. Don't be dumb.
That is a perfect way to wrap up the webinar here this month. Thank you to all of our attendees for joining us. As I said earlier, we will have the recorded version of this up on our YouTube, and I will be sure to follow up with you all on that. And thank you again, John and Will. We hope to have you on a webinar again soon.
Very good. Thank you, Carly.
Thank you all. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye now.